afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Josh. I'm going to be your presenter today. We're here to talk about payroll and pay period reports in payroll. All right, so we're going to go into payroll, and the reports we're talking about are right up here under report/export in the upper left. Pay reports, we're going to talk about our pay period earnings reports. There are two of them, the taxable earnings detail report and the pay type earnings detail report. And then we're going to talk about the pay period deductions reports. Pay period deductions report. That's a really important one. I mean, these others are important too, but the one that's really, really important for things like your 941 taxes and things like that is pay period deductions. All right, so all of the reports, as everything in payroll typically is date driven. And what I mean by that is if I were to choose something like my taxable earnings detail report, it always prompts for a date range in the upper left. It is prompting for June 22nd here, 2024, because that is the date of the last pay that I had posted in the payroll software when constructing payroll data, okay? So it's going to typically default to whatever the most recent pay date that it finds in the software. But I can run these reports you can run this report for any date range you wish. A day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years, 10 years, you choose what period of time you want to see on the report. And that is important. I mean, what you enter is going to determine ultimately what the totals are going to show, whether it's the total for each one of the employees or payees in question, or a grand total for all of them collectively, because you're going to see that we're going to see totals for all of them on all of the reports. I mean, not only totals for each employee or payee, but for each one of the columns, they're going to have grand totals in each of them as well. So essentially the question is, what do you want to see? Do you want it for 1 day, a week, a month, 6 months? You choose. Okay, when we're going to talk about the pay period deductions report, that's going to become more vitally important. So in this case, taxable earnings detail, I can run for both employees or contractors. It's going to default to running it or wanting to print it for all of our everyone, in this case for employees, but I can go to specific and select just one employee if I wish. It will automatically include archived or terminated payees in the period. Now again, if they weren't paid within the respective date range, doesn't matter whether they're archived or terminated or not. If there's no records to show, it's not going to suddenly throw an archived or terminated employee onto the report simply because you've asked for it, okay? Only if they have pay history in that time period or date range. You can also restrict it by the pay type, the pay period, or the department, or any of the above, okay? But as the report describes, and this is kind of true about all three of these reports, is the actual name of the report are typically describe exactly what the report includes. So in this case, the taxable earnings detail report is going to show taxable earnings for each one of the units that they're being paid for, what they're being paid for, and what their actual earnings are for the respective taxing district or authority, as the case may be, okay? So I'm going to just enter a little bit of a broader date range here. So we're going to do, like, say, January 1 through January 31st, 2024, okay, for everybody, and I'm going to click print. And you can export the report too. But and you can go to columns, and I'm going to have to scroll right here to a little bit. So first of all, on the far left, it says, is the payroll posted? Well, yeah, I mean, that's important. I mean, if it's not posted, it's not going to be reflecting on their pay record. And so if it says no there, that's certainly reason for concern. And if you're unsure how to deal with that, please let us know. But then it does show each employee, shows the regular units, meaning hours or days or whatever you've paid them for. And I like to point this out on this particular report as we notice Larry, our senior pastor, has 0 under regular units, but he's got pay for the period. Well, what gives? Well, because he's a salaried employees don't require a unit be entered to represent the gross pay. Meanwhile, I do have other salaried employees like Steve or John or Roger who are also salaried that I simply happen to have one entered under their hours worked for their pay that I don't have entered for Larry. So again, just keep in mind, for salaried employees, there's no requirement to enter anything under hours worked. It'll still calculate based on whatever their regular pay is. So just like to point that out because that's a question that comes up. Well, why is Larry not showing regular units but showing pay? It's just how we've set up the database, okay, to show you. These other folks, Jimmy and George, are definitely hourly employees, and it does require those in order to be able to calculate their gross pay, okay? It also shows the regular pay they've been paid for, any regular units that they've been paid, PTO time they've been paid for during the period, the total of those, and the earnings without allowances, or regular gross pay. Then it shows total allowances, and in this case for Steve and for Larry, likely that's going to be housing allowance for them. Could be any allowances, but it's a grand total of all allowances. Also, Social Security and Medicare wages. Now, this is not taxes. These are earnings, okay? And as I said on the report, it summarizes the taxable earnings that as they are respectively reported to the respective taxing authority. So federal income or federal wages, state wages, local and miscellaneous wages or earnings if applicable, okay? So many of you might be going, well, why is the pastors not showing Social Security and Medicare wages? Because they're not required, they don't report those, certainly if they're going to be claiming a housing allowance as well, okay? So it does generate some pretty drastic total differences at the bottom down here is Social Security and Medicare wages are considerably lower than federal, state, or local because the ministers they're marked as ministers and not reporting Medicare, Social Security wages, okay? So just FYI, this report is really helpful when you're trying to determine or answer questions that you may have about an employee's respective taxable earnings. These figures should literally match up with the respective boxes on the W-2 form, okay? If you were to run it for the year, say, okay? But I've only run it for a month, all right? And as always, each one of our reports does include a legend or summary or a breakdown of exactly what's being included on the report or what we're selecting in the legend at the bottom, okay? But just, again, these are reports, folks. We're trying to point you to tools that we believe will help you when you're trying to answer your own questions for yourself about payroll and what the behavior is, okay? We did cover, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I did go over the history reports I think I did a couple weeks ago back out there. That video's out on the Resource Center too. Very helpful, lots of helpful, useful information in other reports and other portion of the thought in the other portion of the payroll module, okay? And again, our grand totals down here at the bottom, totals. So total regular units, total PTO. Now, I'm not showing any PTO, but if I go in, because I know I entered some PTO for an employee for March. So if I do now March 1st through March 31st and click print, I think Jimmy's going to have some PTO. Yeah, there we go. So here we have Jimmy Hilliard had 82 regular units in March, 8 hours of PTO for a total of 90 units. Okay. So again, I'm just confirming that paid time off or vacation or sick time, it'll all be labeled as PTO here on the report. We'll report when it's applied to an employee's check. Okay. All right, so let's go back to our pay reports, pay period earnings. Let's do pay type earnings detail. Similar type selections, folks. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't go over columns. Columns are a convention that in Church Windows as a whole, you simply need to familiarize yourself with, okay? While these reports do report on specific information often, you can decide to include or omit whatever columns you want. Okay, if I don't want to see, total units, I can double click and take that off. Okay, you can also reorder them using these up and down arrows on the right. Okay, so the same is true when if I were to go back to my taxable earnings report as well. I've got similar, columns available, lots of columns here. Maybe you don't find some of them useful. If not, remove them. Okay, it'll remember them that you remove them automatically, and until you add them back, like right now, state taxes isn't there. Okay, under taxable earnings. All right. Let's add that back. This might add some considerable length to the report, but let's go back to select payees. But you choose the date range. You choose who you're wanting to run the report for. Oh, this is the same report I was at. Sorry, let's go back to the pay type earnings report. But similarly, enter the date range. Who are you running it for? Is it for all employees or specific employees? Do you want to run it for particular pay type, pay period, or department, or a combination therein? Do I want to include or omit archived payees and columns? So here's my columns that I'm choosing to. And again, I can reorder them using the up and down arrows here to the far right. And of course, you have font control as well, which typically I don't adjust much. All right, let's go back again to our, let's do the whole first quarter then in this case. And and again, you can export these reports too, folks. Click print. And it brings up, and again, the pay type earnings detail is as described. Okay, how many regular units were employees paid within the date range? How many PTO units were they paid? What were the total units? What were their regular earnings? What were their paid time off earnings, which could include anything that's categorized under PTO. However you set it up, whether it's PTO, vacation, sick time, what have you. What are the allowances in this case, typically paid to the minister, pastors, and what were their total earnings? I really appreciate this report because of its simplicity. Now, this doesn't say, okay, here's how much should be reported as federal wages or, state wages. That's not what this report does. Okay? This is a different report. And similarly, it does have grand totals for the period, the date range entered as well. Okay. Again, utilize these, folks. You can run it for one pay date. You can run it for whatever period of time you wish, depending on what you want to see. And sometimes you have to kind of explore that just until you get what you're wanting. All right. Let's go to our pay period deductions report. All right. The pay period deductions report is a very important report from the standpoint that it's the report that should be used to determine your 941 tax deposit based on whatever your deposit schedule is. If your total deposits are less than $2,500 for the quarter, then you would be considered, according to the government, a quarterly depositor. If you're, if more than that, then you're either going to be monthly or semi-weekly. Okay. So the pay period deductions report determines that. Similar type controls here that we've seen on the others. Date range. Who do we want to run it for? Who do we want to include? Everybody, employees, contractors, both, specific or all, based on a pay type, pay period, or department, and including archived or terminated payees. Okay? So while the report, it is literally as described, showing the deductions that are deducted from employees' pay, whether it be deductions or taxes, as the case may be. So let's say we're a monthly depositor. We're going to enter, I'm just going to go back to January of 2024. So we're going to put in the first month, 1/1 through 1/31, and simply click print. Okay. So again, it breaks down each employee's gross pay, Social Security monies that were withheld, any federal income tax that was withheld, state taxes, total deductions, total local taxes. This doesn't break down individual local taxes, if applicable, you'd have to run a different report for that, but it does do total all local taxes, any total miscellaneous taxes, gross less tax, and what the employee's net pay amounts were. Total net pay, okay? Notice down here in the bottom left, 941 deposit. So as a monthly depositor, say, I would run this report. I go, okay, that amount is $20.59.60. I would then jump into EFTPS online, post that payment, then go into accounting and post that payment under pay bills for that. If you have a 945, excuse me, again, if my memory serves correctly, and I'm not a qualified tax person, folks, I believe that would be income tax that was withheld for non-employees, so notably contractors usually, which is very rare. I've been doing this a long time and I don't think I've ever seen that, but if you are withholding taxes for contractors, that's where that would report. Also notice that it is taking the totals under each one of the employees' Social Security and Medicare columns and doubling those to confirm that it is including the employer's share of Social Security and Medicare in that 941 deposit total, okay? Very important report. If you're a semi-weekly depositor, then of course probably our date range would be entered as 1/1 through 1/15 of January, okay, for the first half of the month. There's my 1/2 month there. And then when I was ready to run it for the second half, I would run it through probably 1/16 through the final day of the month, in this case, January 31st, and to determine that second half of the month tax liability, okay? Or if you're a quarterly depositor, then you would just simply run it for the whole entire quarter, okay? But that is the report that you're going to want to run to determine your tax liability that you'll then go into EFTPS. And even if I were a monthly or semi-weekly depositor, if I run it for the quarter, the total of my 941 deposits down here should still equal all of those payments posted within that period, okay? So again, important. And if you have state taxes, income tax that you're paying, you're going to want to use this report to determine what you need to pay to the state too. So right here, if assuming, say, in the state of Ohio, Columbus here, we're ready to pay our first quarter state taxes. I've run this for 1/1 through March 31st. Boom, $596 is there. That's what I would pay. Again, going online and paying it if applicable, or paying it to the state and then going into accounting and posting that payment to show that they were paid. Total deductions would be other deductions, I believe, folks. So things like pension contributions or health insurance or HSA deductions or things like that, not taxes. This would be other types of deductions, not tax withholdings, okay? So, again, folks, I know it's 20 minutes, kind of a whirlwind through the reports, but again, the reports are as described. They literally do show you exactly what their title kind of says they actually are. And so it's important that, as long as you're looking at that, depending on what you need, somewhere along the line, you should be able to find a report that works for get you what you're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and leave the topic there for today.